Welcome to We Have a Spiritual Problem, a podcast where we wrestle with what's broken, what's sacred, and what it means to be whole. I'm Dr. Jeff Armstrong, and today I want to reflect on something that's been pulsing at the core of my thinking. What if the line drawn between the spiritual and the physical is a false one? What if our bodies are more than vessels, or worse, prisons, for our souls? What if they're instruments of meaning, antennas for the divine, even laboratories of transcendence? I often talk about well-centered fitness, the SPIES framework, where wellness and true health requires balance across the spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social dimensions. But today, I want to specifically reflect on the connection between the spiritual and the physical, because I think if we don't resolve that relationship, everything else starts to fall apart. So here's the question I'm inviting you and myself to reflect on. What does it mean to live as if your body is spiritual? And what does it mean to treat your spirit as something that needs training, like a muscle? We lift weights to grow stronger. We train for endurance. We stretch for flexibility, or at least we should. But when was the last time you asked, what am I training my soul for? And before I lose anyone who will say, I'm not religious, I don't believe there's a soul, let's not bog ourselves down with religious dogma. Remember, on this podcast, we define spiritual as the belief that there is something greater than self. When I speak of soul, I'm referring to our essence, our consciousness. Perhaps we can modify the question, who am I training to become? I often say, muscles don't grow in the gym. They grow during rest, after tension. A recent guest on this podcast, Kadrick Bloomquist, once commented to me that we are to train hard, but recover harder. Is this also true for faith, for character, for spiritual growth, for personal growth? Let's flip it. When you feel out of alignment spiritually, when you feel lost and unfulfilled, does your body tell you? Are you sleeping poorly, holding tension, gaining weight without explanation? Could your body be speaking in the language of symptoms for a spiritual problem? Can our physical health be a manifestation of our spiritual health? The more I pursue an understanding of the spiritual and the physical, the more I perceive a connection between the two. In my personal faith as a Christian, more specifically a follower of Christ, I believe this to be evident in the statement that Jesus is holy man and holy God. He brought together that which is physical, the body, and that which constitutes our physical being, with the underlying forces and energies that connect and unite us. Call it God, the universe, a higher power, the force, whatever suits you. We will come back to this shortly. So I ask you and I ask myself, what does your physical state today reveal about your spiritual health? Do you train your body in ways that align with your values? When do you feel most in your body and also in your spirit? Have you ever had a physical experience, a workout, a walk in nature, even pain that felt spiritually significant? I can speak to myself that I feel this all the time. My physical state, my health, is often a reflection of how I am doing spiritually and vice versa. If I'm not doing well physically, I also tend to be suffering a bit more in my spiritual health, my relationships, and all those that connect to the physical and the spiritual. And when we look at training our bodies, why are we doing that? Are we doing it to benefit others for a purpose greater than self? Are we doing it for vanity, self-confidence, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but for more vain purposes? Are we doing it for more purposeful, more profound purposes? I'm not sure that I can disconnect the question, when do I feel most in my body and in my spirit? I feel like the two are so deeply intertwined. I don't know if you as a listener feel the same way, but perhaps as we continue through today's conversation, that might become a little bit clearer. I'm sure we all have had experiences where we just have that wow feeling, whether it's being out in nature, whether we are in a workout, just feeling that there's something going on greater than self here. To me, it is a very hard thing to verbalize, that connection between the spiritual and the physical. And so I hope as we kind of continue through today, some of this might become a little bit more relevant. Maybe a few more stories will pop up in my mind that can help me to share kind of where I'm at with this idea that we can't really separate the physical and the spiritual. Quantum physics tells us that everything is connected, that particles can influence each other's across space, tremendous amounts of space. Some call that entanglement. In religion, we might call that prayer, action, communion. What if these aren't contradictions, but two lenses on the same mystery? The more I study anatomy and physiology, and the more I explore my faith, the more I see that the physical and the spiritual are inseparable, from the smallest energy particles to the vastness of an ever-expanding universe. I am reminded of Rob Bell's book and talk, Everything is Spiritual. Rob Bell makes the case that there is no separation, no line dividing the sacred, secular, body and soul, matter and meaning. The spiritual isn't some mist floating above our lives. It's woven into the fabric of everything, into atoms, into relationships, into breath. This is not a book about religion. It's a book about everything, about how everything is connected, about what it means to be human. That resonates deeply with the idea that the body isn't a distraction from the spirit. It is the spirit, the mess, the beauty, the biology, the brokenness. It all belongs. And isn't that what quantum physics seems to suggest? That reality isn't made up of separate parts, but it's fundamentally relational, mysterious, and interdependent? To me, the spiritual and the physical defy human understanding. Rob Bell also challenges the Western obsession with dualism, the idea that spirit is good and body is bad. He says, no, that's not the story. In the ancient Hebrew imagination, the body is sacred. Creation is good. Dirt and dust are what God breathes. So maybe it's time we stop trying to escape the physical and instead ask, what if this body, this aching knee, this morning walk, is the place where the divine shows up? Everything is spiritual, including you. Another voice that speaks profoundly to the union of the spirit and the physical is Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a Jesuit priest, mystic, and scientist who wrote The Phenomenon of Man in the mid-20th century. Teilhard shows evolution not just as a biological process, but as a spiritual journey, a divine unfolding. He believed that the universe is not winding down, but winding up, moving toward greater consciousness, complexity, and unity in what he called the Omega point, the moment when all things are fully integrated in Christ in divine love. He wrote, "We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience." Teilhard didn't see a contradiction between science and faith. He saw evolution as the very mechanism of God's creative work. He was a paleontologist by training, but a mystic at heart. For him, the dust of the earth and the destiny of the soul were part of one continuum. Before I studied exercise physiology, I studied geology. At one point, I believed it might be all or nothing, that I had to choose between creation and evolution. I saw, however, in the Judeo-Christian story of creation, the mirror of evolution. This was before I even knew of Teilhard. Teilhard saw evolution as the very mechanism of God's creative work. Think about that in the light of our bodies. If matter is evolving toward spirit, then your very cells, your muscles, and your heartbeat are part of a sacred trajectory. The work you did this morning, the food you ate, the pain you are holding, none of it is meaningless. Teilhard would say it's all part of the spiritualization of matter. I believe that mankind has moved from a physical evolution to spiritual evolution. So when we train the body, when we heal, when we strive toward balance, not just physically, but across all dimensions of well-being, we are not resisting the spiritual path, we are participating in it. There's a paradox in the quantum world. The observer affects the observed. So here's the question. Does how we see the world change what it becomes? And by extension, does how we see the body change how the soul manifests? I have some questions for you, the listener, and the viewer. Do you believe the universe is fundamentally material or meaningful? How do you reconcile your spiritual experiences with what science says is real? Do you believe intention, your internal state, has a measurable effect on the external world? What are you observing in your life that you might also be shaping without realizing? These are profound questions, and I think they warrant daily reflection and discussion. These are things I meditate on a regular basis. To me, There is no distinction in the universe between the material and the meaningful. It's all one. It's all God. Whether you want to call it God, the universe, a force, the higher power, just existence, it's all one. And the more I look into the science of what is real, the more I see the reality of spirituality, and vice versa. I just find it impossible to separate the two. How about you? Do you feel the same way? Can you reconcile your spiritual experiences? And again, these are not religious experiences per se. These are the experiences that give you that wow, that sense of something greater than self. Can you reconcile that with what science says is real? Do you believe intention, your internal state, has a measurable effect on the external world? I do. I believe that if I were to go back in time and change one aspect of my life, it's going to have a rippling effect on not only myself and my life, but on countless others that I've interacted with, some of whom I didn't even realize I interacted with. And I think that's a profound question to ask ourselves, because we get to a point in our lives where like, oh, if I'd only done this, or if I'd only done that, or if this hadn't happened, or if this person hadn't came into my life, or if this person had come into my life, things would be so different now. Yes, they'd be different, but how different? And where would you be? So to me, the key isn't where life has taken me, but where I am right now and what am I going to do with that? And that's where the physical I think everything I observe on a daily basis are both things that I am shaping and things that are shaping me. So religion has rituals, science has methods, fitness has routines. They are all, at some level, disciplines that are designed to shape the unseen. In the gym, we measure strength by what we can lift. But what if we measured spiritual strength by what we can carry? Grief, responsibility, doubt, and still show up with love. Too many people divide their lives. Sunday for the soul, Monday for the grind. But what if the grind is sacred? What if showing up physically, fully embodied, is a form of worship? Is your spiritual life isolated by your physical habits? What rituals do you practice daily that could become sacred if seen differently? Where do you need to let science inform your faith or faith inform your science? What weight are you carrying, physically or spiritually, that you're ready to name? I believe life is a spiritual act. I believe our bodies matter, not as status symbols, but as sacred vessels. I believe you can pray with your breath, worship with your steps, and connect with God. And I capitalize God, separating that from my vision of God or my limited view of what God could be or what religion states God to be. But I believe you can pray with your breath, worship with your steps, and connect with God between the reps just as surely as you can in your cathedral. So maybe it's time to stop asking, is this spiritual or physical? And start asking, what's the integration? What's the training plan? What would it mean to live a life where the body trains the soul and the soul feeds the body? I often teach in exercise physiology about periodization and working the various systems simultaneously and progressively in order to arrive at a specific training goal, at a specific performance level. And at times we are focused more on, say, hypertrophy versus strength or endurance. And we manage our growth to be able to optimize growth in the many dimensions of the physical. Why is this not different in the spiritual? And wellness as a whole, as our spies, as we look at our spiritual and physical, the connection between those two are so intertwined and so necessary that we focus on both of them. And these in turn then lead to a greater intellectual wellness as we look at trying to learn and understand the physical and the spiritual. It leads to greater knowledge that further feeds and fuels the soul and the physical. And these things tend to help to benefit us emotionally. As we grow spiritually, physically, and intellectually, we have better control over our emotional state and our well-being in that regard. And of course, if we are well-balanced spiritually, physically, intellectually, and emotionally, then it's going to have profound effects on our social interaction, which further feeds back into our sense of the spiritual, where there's something greater than self. So this week, notice where your physical habits are disconnected from your spiritual values, however you define spiritual. Just observe, no judgment, and maybe, just maybe, do one thing that honors both. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of others.